How exactly is JJ McCarthy looking at OTAs? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate you all so greatly. You make this thing go, especially in June. We are officially in the driest month of all sports. Thank goodness that the NBA playoffs and NHL playoffs extend this far, because otherwise we used to, like, June used to be the worst. Now it's like late June, early July. Anyways, thank you all so much for hanging out. If you're new here, what's up? My name is Luke. You can find the show anywhere you find podcasts. Just search out Locked On Vikings on any podcast listening app, like the SiriusXM app, where you can also find live broadcasts of, say, like finals games. You can also find this show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Today on the show, first we're going to get really nitty-gritty with some JJ McCarthy stuff. Bear with me here, because I know I have said a whole bunch of times, OTAs, you can't learn anything from them. And then I talked to somebody who was smart enough to learn something from them, who relayed that to me, and I'm going to relay that to you. So that's coming up, as well as the Everyman Series entry for a free agent you definitely forgot that we had on the team. First, let's do this JJ McCarthy thing. So when we're talking OTAs, we need to be very, very careful, right? I don't think you can chart OTAs, right? Like, you can't look at how accurate the passes were and get any sort of instructive data for a whole bunch of reasons, especially with rookies who are going to be retooling mechanics, and they're not really going to be expected to hit every throw and be on time to everything perfectly. There are certain things that the team is looking for with JJ McCarthy right now. Is he doing this thing when you're trying to teach him, right? But I feel like too often we see camp and all this stuff as an evaluative place instead of an educational place. And O'Connell has made this very, very clear that this is an educational time. Nobody's being evaluated right now. Let's all just sit and learn. And I think that there's definitely a lot of cool merit to that. So let's take that same mentality in. Most of what I've seen of people trying to, like, glean anything from an OTA throw is like, well, that was a little behind him, or was it his fault, or what was the route supposed to be? What was the read supposed to be? And you never know any of that stuff. So you can't get an answer you ever feel good about. So instead, I'm looking at process. I'm looking at mechanics. And what you see in OTAs, comparing to what you saw not only in his college tape, but in his combine throws and the pro day, starts to tell a story of what he's trying to do. The work he's done, I think he's still working with NFL athletics. That was who he worked with as a kid. And some of the big names in NFL athletics with an X, you can look them up. Or whoever he's been working with in this off season, which might not even be publicly available information, plus whatever O'Connell's been having him work on. You can see the differences. So that's what I'm going to talk about today is sort of the differences that we can see through OTAs. But that's not going to give you a satisfying answer to, is JJ McCarthy good? Which is too simple and blunt of a question to have a really good answer to. It's like asking, are you happy? Like, man, I don't know. That's a very complicated idea. Sometimes, but not other. I don't know. So instead, let's try to hone in on this a little bit more. So there's some really, like, deep mechanical stuff that we should go through. But the big thing that you should understand is with stride length. When McCarthy would step into the pass, he would often step too far. And then he would lose his balance and his hips would come through too far. That robs energy from his shoulders, from his top, and therefore from the ball. And then you lose stuff. You have the ball die on you like it did in that TCU pick six that happened in the first quarter of the playoff in his second year. That is the one a lot of people bring up when they want to disparage McCarthy. It's like the only, like, time that ever happened. That's like a big one for he doesn't have arm strength. Like people saw that one, said, oh, must have a weak arm. And then that was like the end of their thought process. I hope we can go a little deeper than that. But, the velocity is still coming off. The ball's coming out with a lot of heat. Like all the beat reporters talked about. Alec Lewis came out and came on this show and talked about that last week or 2 weeks ago. So you can go listen to that. But you're losing control when you have that. So all those steps, I kind of flashed through it. But when he would, in college, when he would step, he would step too wide. He would be sitting there too wide. And when he would throw, when his back leg would come off the ground during the throw, his body is now stressed a little bit because he's stretching. He's doing the splits. He's doing a lunge, basically. Not quite the whole way, but like a little bit. And so to re-straighten out, his hips want to come back around, which is good. You want your hips to come through the throw, but you don't want if you're a righty, your right hip to extend past like square to the line of scrimmage. You don't want it to keep rotating. That's over rotating. And you'll see that phrase thrown around a little bit with quarterbacks. So if you hear over rotating, like kind of look at his right pocket or dominant side pocket. And if that comes around further to where, his belt buckle is pointed towards, say, the sideline or anywhere past kind of the line of scrimmage over to his non-dominant side, that means that energy stayed in his hips and didn't transfer up through his body. And that's what you want. If you think of a quarterback, this is the metaphor that I've been using. If you think of like you twist up a towel, right, and you smack it, that's kind of the same physics, this like kind of twisting energy where you want to twist up your body and then untwist it. And that's like the most force that the human body can generate on a thing that they are throwing. And it's going to be a lot more force than you can ever get with your arm. It's the same logic with a golf swing or a baseball pitch or a baseball swing, honestly. And so in an ideal world, and if you want a great one, look at Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson, freak of nature, is phenomenal at this. Where you want the hips to kind of come through before the shoulders come through. You want his hips, you want his belt buckle to be pointing downfield before his shoulders have even turned a little bit. And some people just aren't that flexible. Like even sitting here in my chair trying to like simulate it, I can tell that I'm not that flexible. And the true freaky freaks are. JJ McCarthy's is about halfway there, but by the time his shoulders come through, which is pretty good. That's plenty. It's not quite Anthony Richardson athleticism, but it's plenty of flexible athleticism. And you can see that in OTAs, and that's really good. He got a little bit more in college because he was used to that stride length. Now that he's kind of shortened that stride length to long-term solve this problem, he's not quite as smooth and comfortable with it as he was in college. And that's where you get to this is a work in progress kind of thing. And not the Midwest version of work in progress where you really mean it's bad, but you're being nice about it because you're from the Midwest. No, I mean like genuinely, this is something that is finding progress, but is going to be worse in the meantime. And that just has to be okay. And so you're going to miss some on that too, because you're not quite getting that. And then you're going to have to try to torque it. This is the kind of thing where if he had to play a game right now, if he didn't develop anymore and he had to go in and play a game, that habit might metastasize and he might just become an inaccurate passer. And this kind of thing has happened in the NFL before. So you have his hips kind of not coming through as much as they used to, but still is okay. But you're shortening that stride length. The other thing that happens is because that feels uncomfortable, and it really looks to me like it feels uncomfortable. Like obviously I'm speculating, but like it really does seem like it. He's sort of leaning away from the pass a little bit more than he used to, and his shoulders aren't on the level. It's different. Like, so when you're trying to like really cork up a deep ball, you'll want to kind of launch you'll want to like cock up your front shoulder to get a higher launch angle because you're trying to get air into the ball. But on any throw, by the time you come through, your shoulders shouldn't be leaning. You might want to lean a little bit away from it just to get the arm angle right or something, but your shoulders need to kind of like, if you imagine you got spinning plates on your shoulders, you don't want those spinning plates to be leaning. You should be able to, put a glass of wine on them without it spilling. And the reason for that is the reason for a lot of the arm angle stuff that I talked about a ton with Penix. But it's sort of the same thing happening here where you want your arm to come up nice and like straight. You want it to be a nice straight arc over as your arm goes up and throws the ball. If your shoulders are leaning, or if any part of that is like cocked and on any kind of diagonal, it gets a lot harder to control the directionality of the ball, and you're just going to start spraying. You're going to start losing accuracy. So all these things are coming up because you've shortened the stride, and it's good to shorten the stride. All those little things now are way more solvable problems than how do you become accurate with too long a stride. You can fix all those other things over time, and a lot of that is just going to be comfortable with this new way of throwing, and he's uncomfortable right now. That's what this is for. So there's more stuff that I want to talk about, as well as the Miles Gaskin thing, so that'll all come up next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you want to go ahead and start, get yourself going on grambling on the NFL, which I would say wait, but you can also go bet on like basketball games, hockey, whatever. Baseball's, of course, in season. But right now, Dallas Turner is at plus 430 to make Defensive Rookie of the Year. JJ McCarthy, plus 1,000. If he gets off to a hot start somehow, starts week 1, gets in there really good, you could get really good odds right now if you were so inclined. You can find all that. And if you're new, you can get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, homer props, like whatever you want. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thanks a million for hanging out today, listening to the Locked On Vikings podcast. If you need more Minnesota sports talk, Timberwolves eulogies, whatever you want there, you can go to the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube page, go to their live tab, and find 24/7 Minnesota sports Locked On shows like this one, Locked On Wolves, Wild, etc. Moving on here, there are a couple other things mechanically that I wanted to talk about with JJ McCarthy. So there is one thing I want to correct myself on that I talked about with all the quarterbacks, and I think I criticized a couple of the quarterbacks incorrectly, and I forget who I said this about, but I think you're seeing it everywhere. With his lead foot, what I used to want is I wanted the toe, like that lead toe, to point directly at what you're throwing. This is a JT O'Sullivan thing. And apparently it's fairly new tech, a reasonably new fad. Like in the last year or two, coaches have started to coach quarterbacks to curl that toe in. They call it like close the toe off a little bit. This is a thing that was new to the guy I was talking to, who's like very steeped in the world of like QB trainers and gurus and stuff. So this is like very cutting edge, and this is what JJ McCarthy does. This is what I think Caleb Williams does. A lot of people do this now, very on purpose. And the reason is because it controls when your hips lock up. And remember, I talked about that over rotation thing where if you've, whipped up the towel, you want all of the energy, that twisting tension, to release at the end of the towel. And in the human body, that's on the arm, right? So if your hip is coming through, that means you didn't quite get it all. You're rotating too much. You don't want energy to be left in your hips carrying it forward. The toe, that front toe closing off, and like the best way, honestly, to learn it is to just like try it. Just next time you're up, just like step that way. Like step like you're going to throw into a pass, but like don't open your foot up as much as like to the point where it's pointing directly at your target, like only like 45 degrees, leave it closed a little bit. And then just try to move your hips back and forth. And you'll feel your hips lock up, and you'll feel like where they can no longer go. That kind of measured perfectly, like locks them up exactly when you want them to lock up, so that whatever kinetic energy is left is going to be released the only place it can now, because your cleats are in the ground, your hips are locked up, it's going to go up to your shoulders and to your arm where you want it. That I think it's a really cool like manipulation of biomechanics mostly. And it's something that I harped for a long time that I guess is now, hey, things grow and change, and we gotta learn with them. I think that's really dope. So there's another thing that McCarthy seems to be doing that is new, and I think this is a Vikings thing more than it is like a QB trainer thing. when he does his drop back, so when you get to the top of your drop, the way you line your feet up, you want to make sure that you have your back foot essentially directly underneath you when you're ready to throw. That's going to be where the most weight is loaded up on it. That's going to be where you can get the most tension as you like kind of wind up and you know, pull the pin on the grenade, as it were, and throw. To get his feet underneath him, they've got him basically getting to the top of his drop and then giving like a bump, like a really quick like flutter of his heels to sort of get that weight distributed and get that balance back underneath him and sort of catch the backward momentum of the drop back, right? Like, especially on longer drop backs, you're crossing over, you're getting a lot of backward momentum, but you don't want to go further back because that ruins your tackle's angle. So that little flutter, it's a little clunky looking in the OTA clips that I can find. By the way, the compilation of clips that I looked at was, I think, Twinber Vikes was the name of the Twitter account that like cut it all up, which was awesome. So thank you, Twinber Vikes, if you are listening. I use your video, so thanks. So in one of those, you could kind of see that flutter a little bit slow, and then the ball came out maybe a scotch late. We're talking milliseconds, but milliseconds matter. That was the one that a lot of people were arguing about to Thayer Thomas that kind of ended up a little bit high and behind him. And I think that was just a little bit late. But you also see him taking a long time to hitch his way over to those further outside throws. And this is where it starts to tell a story. So the throws to the outside, big JJ McCarthy problem. That was like the issue with McCarthy, was throwing to the outside, particularly to the left. We kind of saw that is where his accuracy sort of faltered, especially deeper. And part of that, I think, was that when he wouldn't get his feet lined up far enough to the outside, and then he would have to overcorrect and overstride to try to make it, and you'd get all these accuracy problems we just talked about. Or he just would keep everything way too closed off, and he wouldn't he wouldn't open his hips up enough, and then his hips would lock too early and he would lose power, and then he'd just have to wing it with his really strong arm. And then you spray him, right? So all of it can potentially be solved by getting him to line up more dramatically, to get more rotation when he hitches, so that he can, one hitch and flip from this side of the field to the other side of the field. You can see Cousins do this on a lot of reps, and I like looking at Cousins as a sort of a veteran that does all of the mechanical things by the book and correctly. Like, he's a good example to learn what it's supposed to look like. And he could do that where he would flip from one side of the field to the other, flip his feet, and still be lined up to throw the next thing, which makes it really easy to install, multi-side of the field reads and stuff, and 1-2 on the left side, 1-2 on the right side, and get through those quickly and still run it all timing based. That worked really well. And that's, I think, one of the big reasons O'Connell liked Cousins so much. So with McCarthy, it's, 2-3 hitches to get all the way over there. That's too much time. That's too much motion. So you got to get more with that. But we're not there yet, right? We're just getting him to get in the habit of wanting his feet to be lined up and not having to think, oh, I should get my feet lined up. Like, you want him to just be used to being lined up a little bit more to the outside, especially on like quick outs and stuff. And then you can worry about quickening that process, but you want him to be comfortable in that process first. So that's where we're at. So things are late and things are missing sometimes, and things aren't clunky and kind of uncomfortable, and there's stuff not going great. That's part of it. And as, consumers of ideas, not even football fans or watchers, because some people just want to turn their brains off. And honestly, if you just want to turn your brains off and watch sports, you're probably not here. You're a diehard if you're here in June. And thank you. I love you very much. Thank you for being here. And if you're like this into it, then I think it's probably reasonable that we can sort of look at a miss and not immediately say that means he's bad. That might mean that there's a problem that needs solving, but asking why it happened and what part of what process it was is really important. And understanding that it doesn't tell you JJ McCarthy is going to be good, but hopefully it can at least give you a little bit of comfort in the fact that we're in the middle of a process, and that process is going to be a whole bunch of different things. But what we could get from OTAs, and I think this is really cool, is a sense for what that process is, what the Vikings are trying to do with him, and the fact that you see a longish list means, oh, wow, we might be here a while. We might have to see some Sam Darnold for half the season, maybe more. And that's going to be okay. That's the plan. And that's going to be super, super worth it, assuming that he takes to all this coaching, which he very clearly is. And that might be the big part, is that all of these changes and things that people are doing with him, he is tackling it head on. Not going to immediately be fantastic at everything. Nobody is. But that there is no resistance, willing or just like bodily resistance, that he's, struggling to take it on. That would be disastrous. And we don't see that. So that's great. But that's probably the limit of what we can learn from OTAs. So let's move on to the Everyman series. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets. It's a ticketing app. You can find NFL games there too as well. If you're getting ahead of things, you want to get your Vikings tickets right now, whether it's just like a rivalry game, go get your Packers tickets, your home opener against the 49ers tickets. No holidays this year, which is a godsend if you ask me. But hey, if you're planning a trip to London, you want to get those tickets, check it out on Gametime. Or if you're trying to get last minute to any sporting event, with a Twins game or concerts, whatever, comedy, theater, you can find it all at Gametime. You can save it to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, or theater. And you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know that you're getting a view that you're satisfied with. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. In Linwood, Washington, there is the Alderwood Boys and Girls Club of the Snohomish community. It is a youth center where they offer a lot of youth sports. And if you went there in the aughts, I guess, you would have absolutely found Ivan and Miles Gaskin playing whatever they were offering there at the time. There's two brothers that had two dreams. They'd pray on the bus to school every day from Linwood, which I guess their mom took the same bus. So I guess that was like a city bus, not like a school bus. But anyways, they would literally like bow their heads and pray that they would get their dreams. And they would pray for a scholarship. And they also dreamed about a state championship and to bring it to O'Day High School. In 2011, Miles Gaskin got a chance at the state championship. The Class 3A state championship against Bellevue. And maybe one of the biggest regrets he has, as of an interview he did when he was in Washington. So maybe he has bigger regrets now. But as of then, one of the biggest regrets he had in his life thus far was not being able to close that deal for that state championship, because for a lot of his teammates, they didn't get to like dream about Pac-12 championships later. He went to Washington. They didn't get to think about maybe being a part of, the Dolphins and winning a playoff game or something. Like, they didn't get to dream any bigger than that one game, and he wasn't able to deliver it. Big regret. They were down like 21-3 really fast. They were chasing the game the whole time. But both brothers did get number two. His brother Ivan ended up at Morehouse College in Atlanta, getting a scholarship there. He got a degree in computer science. And Miles Gaskin gets a scholarship to the University of Washington to go be a Husky. And his time at Washington is very much like the legacy running back that breaks all of the records, but he almost never went. He wanted out of the state a little bit. He wanted a scholarship. He wanted to get into college, but he also wanted to get it further away from home and adventure. And he had that kind of wanderlust that a lot of 17-year-old kids have in, junior year when they want to get out. But he gets the scholarship offer from Washington, and his parents convince him, say, hey, stay close to home, stay close to your support system, your family, trust me, like this is going to pay dividends. And he's very, very happy that they did, because he built a lasting legacy at Washington. He was the it guy there. He was the coach's favorite. And he, works hard, like very grind set kind of guy, very humble about all of his accomplishments. First thing he'll do is thank his teammates, which might just be, saying the right thing in front of the media. But all of his coaches, say like, man, if we just had 11 of him of all different shapes and sizes, right? Just the coach's dream kind of player. So I want you to just log that kind of moment where he's the hero of heroes on campus. He's the guy. He is the football lifeblood, backbone, rock, whatever cliche you want to use. But for him, the hardest thing might be the games that he misses. He'll miss a couple games with some injury, and it like kills him. And it puts this chip on his shoulder, this idea of a guy with something to prove, and that's going to follow him around for the rest of the time. Miles Gaskin's been in the league since 2019, so a lot more happens here. But it is got to be jarring to go from the legend of your, D1 Pac-12 school, Washington Huskies, right? They just played in a national championship. That's a big football school. And you're the guy of it, the thunder to Jake Browning's lightning, because it was about Jake Browning's time there too. And then you go drop all the way to the 7th round of the NFL draft. The 2019 NFL draft, this was pretty peak, like running back kind of value was just then starting to fall apart. You had Josh Jacobs in the first round. He fell to 24th. And I think 2 years prior, he could have gone in the top 10 because he was that highly touted of a prospect, but value of running backs was starting to supersede that. Not all the way, right? Like 1 year later, you had Jonathan Taylor, who at certain points in his career has been regarded as the best running back in the league as a second rounder. This is starting to happen around 2019, 2020, right? And he's not the top guy in the class. Josh Jacobs is in that class. David Montgomery's in that class. Tony Pollard was in that class, although we didn't really know about him yet. Miles Sanders, like there are names in that class that absolutely, clear what Miles Gaskin had to offer. So he falls all the way to the side. He almost doesn't get drafted, but he will get drafted by the Miami Dolphins, which kind of rocks for him because he actually grew up, believe it or not, a Dolphins fan, the physically furthest away team from where he grew up. He grew up rooting for them. Big Ricky Williams guy. So I guess that spurred that on. So he's super, super happy about that, but he's a 7th round running back. And now suddenly you're like trying to earn your keep. And for the first time in his career, his like it looks more like being a walk-on than being, the highly recruited, get a scholarship. You're going to be the guy for our franchise, for our program, right? And he's not even the rookie running back that gets the most talk. He is sharing a backfield with Patrick Laird, an undrafted rookie, and kind of a flashy receiving back. So he gets a lot more media attention. There's this moment where Laird gets mistaken for an intern, and someone calls him the intern, and that becomes his nickname, and it becomes this like big joke around the entirety of the 2019 Miami Dolphins training camp. And it's not just the media though. Like Patrick Laird actually leapfrogs Miles Gaskin on the roster, and mind you, this is the 2019 Dolphins. This is Brian Flores' first year there, and Brian Flores will take to Miles Gaskin like crazy. He loves Miles Gaskin, just like all of his other coaches have loved him for all the same reasons. Great, work ethic, approaches things the right way, loves the way that he goes about his business. But for the first 8 games of Miles Gaskin's career, he's a healthy scratch. And that's catastrophic because, again, this is the 2019 Dolphins. This is a team that's trailing by 30 a bunch. You would have got in. Patrick Laird did get in. He got reps. He got chances to prove himself. Miles Gaskin did not. It took until week 10 for him to get in. And then it took until week 15 for him to get real play. He'll have one moment in a game against the Giants, which you might remember as Eli Manning's last game as a Giant. But he'll get one. It's fourth quarter. They're down 31-10 because they suck. and he'll rip off like a 27-yarder. And this is a big moment, which probably nobody even remembers unless you had Miles Gaskin on your fantasy team off the waiver wire or something, because it was week 15. Maybe it won you your playoff. Congratulations. But this is big because suddenly a coaching staff that had entirely overlooked him suddenly goes, wait a minute, he might be a guy. And it just gets his foot in the door enough and opens him up to a true competition in the 2020 offseason. Now, 2020 is 2020. A lot of things change. But, of course, the NFL ends up having a real camp. It's not like, if he had been drafted in 2020, that changes everything for everybody, right? The COVID offseason, if that was your draft, you could have benefited from it, or most people got hurt from it. But for Gaskin, it helps him a couple ways. For one, he just does like outright kind of win the feature back job. He has a great camp in 2020, and they go, okay, actually you can play. You're going to be the guy. Now it's a committee over there in Miami that, Patrick Laird is still getting plenty. They are running around with a lot of different guys, but Gaskin seems to be the feature back, the main guy. So that works out for him, and now he's getting carries and he's getting all these chances to prove himself. When really he just needed the one. He just needed the one in the fourth quarter of a week 15 game in a season where you were actively tanking. But he got his opportunity and he did it, and that led him to be the guy for the 2020 season. Up until November, early November, he hurts his knee. He goes on IR. It's not an ACL tear. It's not a catastrophic thing. It's going to put him out for 3 weeks. And he can go on IR and come back thanks to the COVID rules changing how IR works. He comes back. He plays one game against the Bengals, sans Joe Burrow. That was supposed to be like the Tua Burrow battle, but Burrow was hurt his rookie year. And then he gets COVID, misses 2 weeks off of that. Totally disrupts his momentum as, this 7th round pick story that was kind of emerging finally to be the same guy for the Dolphins that he was for Washington. It wasn't until 2022 that he really outright gets replaced as the Dolphins go out and get Raheem Mostert, and Raheem Mostert becomes the featured back. There's some rotation with Gaskin, but he kind of is left by the wayside, but it's still a living. And in 2023, last year, he'll sign a 1-year extension, but the Dolphins have an insane running back room for that camp. They've got Jeff Wilson. They've got, of course, Mostert. They've got all these guys. And Miles Gaskin ends up as the odd man out. He'll get cut, and he'll get added to the Vikings practice squad. Maybe a little bit too late in his career to become a 350 carry feature back. Never has been. Maybe wouldn't even want to be. That doesn't sound very fun. But he's still got time to squeeze as much out of it for him and his family and everything as he can. And there's a nobility to that. But you got to overcome a lot of those youngsters that are gunning for your job. Hey, tomorrow is Twitter Tuesday, so get your questions in. You can send them to me via email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com or fill out the Google form in the show notes. I'll also put out a call on Twitter at some point on Monday, so keep an eye out for that. I will see you all then, and as always, Skol.